Listen carefully and pay close attention to what I'm about to tell you, because what I'm about to tell you violates nearly 17 different security protocols, and if you're listening to this, you should understand my decision on the matter. My name is Dr. Alan Pierce. For the past 6 years, I have been working as research director at the deep-sea research station Helios 9, located 3,200 meters below the North Atlantic. This facility I'm talking about doesn't appear on any map. It's funded by secret budget allocations that Congress doesn't question. And until 11 days ago, I thought I knew what I was researching here. I was wrong. Let me start at the beginning, before everything started to break apart. Before I saw myself standing in corridors I hadn't walked through. Before the whispers began. The artifact arrived at Helios 9, 6 years ago, recovered from an impact crater beneath the Greenland ice sheet. Dating placed it at approximately 10,000 years old, but its composition defied every conventional analysis. Not terrestrial, not anything we'd encountered in meteorite samples. The molecular structure seemed to shift depending on the observation method, as if the object existed in multiple states simultaneously. My job was simple: figure out what it was, where it came from, and what it did. For 6 years, it did nothing. It sat in the containment chamber on level 7, a perfect sphere roughly 2 meters in diameter, absorbing every scan we threw at it and revealing absolutely nothing. No radiation, no electromagnetic emissions, no response to heat, cold, pressure, or any external stimulus. Just a smooth, dark surface that seemed to swallow light itself. We called it the sphere. Original, I know, but after 6 years of silence, it felt more like furniture than a cosmic mystery. That changed on day 2191 of the research program. November 3rd, 03:47 hours station time. I was in my quarters when the first alarm went off. Not the blaring emergency klaxon that meant hull breach or fire, but the soft, persistent tone that indicated an anomaly in the primary research systems. I'd heard it maybe twice in 6 years, usually due to equipment malfunction. I pulled on my uniform and headed down to level 7, taking the main pressure corridor that connected the residential sections to the research wing. Helios 9 was designed like a series of connected cylinders, each one a self-contained pressure vessel that could be sealed off in case of emergency. The corridors linking them were narrow, claustrophobic, with exposed piping and the constant sound of water pressure groaning against the hull. 3,200 meters of ocean above you changes how you think about walls. When I reached the containment lab, Dr. Helena Stratton was already there, her silver hair pulled back in its usual tight bun, her eyes fixed on the monitoring station. Helena had been with the project since day one of the few people who'd spent more time with the sphere than I had. "Talk to me," I said, moving to her side. She pointed at the frequency analysis display. "Started 19 minutes ago. A harmonic emission at 7.83 hertz. I stared at the readout. 7.83 hertz. The Schumann resonance, the electromagnetic frequency of Earth's atmosphere. The background hum of the planet itself. "That's impossible," I said. "The sphere doesn't emit anything. 6 years of data confirm complete electromagnetic silence." "Not anymore." Helena pulled up the historical baseline. The graph showed a perfectly flat line for 2,190 days, then a sudden spike at 03:28 hours. And it's not just emitting, it's oscillating. Watch. The frequency reading pulsed, rising to 7.84, dropping to 7.82, then returning to 7.83. A rhythmic pattern, like a heartbeat. "How stable is it?" I asked. "Consistent for the past 22 minutes. No degradation, no fluctuation outside this narrow band." Helena looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Uncertainty. "Alan, in 6 years, this thing has been completely inert. Now it's suddenly broadcasting Earth's resonance frequency. What changed?" That was the question, wasn't it? What changed? I moved to the containment window, a 20-centimeter thick polymer barrier that separated us from the chamber. The sphere floated in its magnetic suspension field, exactly as it had for 6 years, dark, smooth, featureless. Except now, if I looked carefully, I could see something. A faint luminescence, barely visible, pulsing in time with the frequency reading. On, off, on, off, like it was breathing. Run a full diagnostic on all monitoring equipment, I said. I want to confirm this isn't instrument error. Already did, twice. Helena pulled up the diagnostic logs. Everything checks out. The emission is real. I stood there, watching the sphere pulse in the darkness, and felt the first cold touch of unease. 6 years of silence, and now this. What were you trying to tell us? Log everything, I said. I want continuous monitoring on all frequencies. If this changes, I want to know immediately. Helena nodded, already pulling up the logging protocols. I'll set up the automated alerts, but, Alan, we need to inform command. This is exactly the kind of development they wanted us to report. She was right, of course. Our primary directive was clear. Any change in the artifact's behavior required immediate notification to the Oversight Committee. But something made me hesitate. Give me 6 hours, I said. Let me gather more data first. I don't want to send up preliminary reports that might be meaningless. It was a weak excuse, and Helena knew it. But she also knew me well enough not to push. 6 hours, she agreed. Then we report. I spent those 6 hours in the lab, watching the sphere pulse its steady rhythm. The frequency never varied more than 0.01 hertz. Perfect consistency. Deliberate. At 0920 hours, I was reviewing the spectral analysis for the 4th time when I noticed something odd. The timestamp on one of the data files showed it had been accessed at 0856 hours while I'd been in the observation room. I pulled up the access log. My credentials. My biometric confirmation. But I hadn't accessed that file. System glitch, probably. Helios 9's computers weren't perfect, and phantom access logs happened occasionally when the servers synchronized data. I made a note to have IT check it and moved on. At 10:47 hours, I found the note. I'd gone to grab a coffee from the break room, leaving my tablet on the lab bench. When I came back, there it was, a yellow sticky note stuck to my screen. 4 words in handwriting I recognized immediately because it was mine. They're lying to you. My hand shook as I picked it up. The letters were identical to my own cramped script, the same way I crossed my T's, the same slight rightward slant. But I hadn't written this. I'd been gone for less than 3 minutes. "Helena," I called out, keeping my voice steady. "Did you see anyone come in here?" She looked up from her terminal. "No. Why?" I showed her the note. Her eyes widened. "That's your handwriting." "I didn't write it." We stared at each other for a long moment. Then Helena moved to the security terminal and pulled up the lab camera footage. We watched in silence as the recording showed me leaving for the break room at 10:44. The lab sat empty for 30 seconds. Then, at 10:45:17, the door opened. I walked in. Except I was still in the break room. The footage showed me, wearing the same uniform, the same ID badge, moving to my workstation with purpose. I picked up the yellow pad we kept by the comm station, wrote something quickly, and stuck it to my tablet screen. Then, I looked directly at the camera. My face. My exact face. But the expression was wrong. Too intense. Too knowing. The double on the screen mouthed 3 words, clearly enough to read, "Close the door." Then he turned and walked out at 10:45:41. 24 seconds. That's how long my double existed in the lab before disappearing. I felt Helena's hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "Alan, what the hell was that?" I couldn't answer. I was too busy calculating timelines. The note appeared while I was in the break room, The security footage showed me in the lab during that exact window. Both things were simultaneously true and impossible. Pull up the corridor cameras, I said, my voice distant. Track where he went. Helena's fingers flew across the keyboard. We watched as my double exited the lab and turned left, heading toward the pressure corridor that led to level 6. The corridor camera picked him up, showing him walking with calm confidence past 2 technicians who didn't give him a second glance. Then, at junction point C7, he simply stopped, stood there for 3 seconds, and vanished. Not walked out of frame, not ducked into a doorway. Vanished. One frame he was there, the next he wasn't, as if someone had deleted him from reality. Check the timestamp, I said. Helena zoomed in on the time code. 1046:03. I pulled out my own tablet and checked my personal log. At 1046:03, I was walking back from the break room, my own corridor camera footage proving I was nowhere near junction C7. This isn't possible, Helena whispered. Quantum states don't work at the macro level. You can't exist in 2 places simultaneously. It violates fundamental physics. So does a 10,000-year-old sphere that it suddenly starts broadcasting Earth's resonance frequency, I pointed out. I looked at the yellow note still stuck to my tablet. They're lying to you. Who's lying? About what? Helena didn't answer. She was staring at something on her monitor, her face gone pale. Alan, she said quietly, this isn't the first time. She pulled up a file I'd never seen before, marked with a security clearance I didn't have. How she'd accessed it, I didn't ask. The file was labeled Personnel Incident Report. Dr. Marcus Reed, classified. Dr. Marcus Reed. I knew that name. He'd been the chief research officer before me, had worked at Helios 9 for 4 years before requesting a transfer 2 years ago. Burnout, they'd said. The isolation got to him. Read this, Helena said, pulling up a specific section. The report detailed Reed's final 3 weeks at the station. Multiple sightings of Reed in locations where he couldn't be. Security footage showing him in 2 places at once, and notes, dozens of notes left at his workstation, all in his handwriting, all warning him about something the report's author had redacted. The final entry was dated 2 weeks before his official transfer request. Subject Reed discovered in level 9 maintenance corridor at 0342 hours, non-responsive and disoriented. Claims he encountered himself in the corridor, that his double told him the artifact was opening. Subject placed on medical leave pending psychological evaluation. Recommend immediate termination of research duties and transfer off station. I looked up at Helena. They never said Reed had a breakdown. They said he requested a transfer for personal reasons. They lied, Helena said simply. She pulled up another file. And he's not the only one. Before Reed, there was Dr. Sarah Okonkwo. Before her, Dr. James Teller. 3 chief research officers in 10 years. All of them reported the same phenomena in their final weeks. Doubles, notes in their own handwriting. And all of them were quietly removed from the station. The pattern was clear, undeniable, and I was next in line. The artifact, I said, the pieces finally clicking together. It started with the artifact's first emission, didn't it? The frequency change. Helena pulled up the historical data. Reed's incidents began the day after the artifact produced its first recorded electromagnetic pulse, a brief spike that lasted only seconds before returning to silence. Okonkwo's incidents coincided with a similar event. Every time the artifact activates, Helena said, the chief research officer starts seeing themselves, and every time they're removed from the station within weeks. Why just the CRO? I asked. Why not everyone exposed to the artifact? I don't know. Proximity, maybe? Duration of exposure? You've spent more direct observation time with the sphere than anyone currently on station. I looked back at the containment window. The sphere pulsed its steady rhythm, 7.83 hertz, the frequency of Earth itself. And I realized with cold certainty that it wasn't just broadcasting. It was communicating. But with what? And why me? We need to go deeper, I said. Reed's files, Okonkwo's, Teller's. I want to know everything they experienced before they were removed, and I want to know what they discovered that made Command bury their reports. Helena hesitated. Alan, if we start digging into classified personnel files, we'll trigger security alerts. Command will know. Let them know. I pulled up my own research logs, 6 years of data on the artifact. Something is happening here, something they've been covering up for years, and I'm not going to end up like Reed, drugged and shipped off station without answers. I looked at the yellow note again. They're lying to you. The question was, about what? Helena took a deep breath, then nodded. Okay. But we do this carefully. No direct access to the classified servers. We piece it together from fragments, side channels, anything that won't leave obvious traces. Agreed. We spent the next 4 hours building our picture. Helena worked the technical side, pulling fragments from backup servers and maintenance logs that hadn't been properly scrubbed. I worked the human side, cross-referencing personnel schedules, supply requisitions, medical records, anything that might tell us what Reed, Okonkwo, and Teller had experienced. The picture that emerged was terrifying. All three had reported the same progression. First, the artifact would activate, producing some kind of emission. Then, within 24 hours, they'd start seeing themselves, doubles appearing in security footage or glimpsed in corridors. The doubles would leave notes, always in the subject's own handwriting, always cryptic warnings. And finally, in the days before their removal, they'd report hearing voices, whispers coming from the artifact itself. But here's what made it truly disturbing. We found logs buried deep in the maintenance records, showing that each time a CRO was removed, the artifact would go completely silent again. No emissions, no activity. As if it was waiting for the next one. It's selecting us, Helena said, her voice barely above a whisper. The artifact is somehow selecting the chief research officers specifically. But why? I asked. What makes us different? Helena pulled up the personnel files for all three previous CROs and added mine to the comparison. Look at the common factors. All of you have PhDs in quantum mechanics. All of you have published papers on multiverse theory, and all of you, she paused, highlighting a specific section, scored in the 99th percentile for pattern recognition on the cognitive assessments required for this assignment. Pattern recognition. The ability to see connections others miss, to find order in chaos. It's not selecting us randomly, I said, understanding dawning. It's selecting people who can understand what it's trying to show us. And then Command removes them before they figure it out. I sat back, my mind racing. The artifact was trying to communicate, had been trying for years, selecting the people most likely to understand its message. And every time someone got close, they were removed, their findings buried under layers of classification. The question was, what was the message? I looked at the time. 15:23 hours. In less than 2 hours, I was supposed to file my report on the frequency anomaly. Command would read it, see that the artifact had activated again, and they'd start watching me, waiting for the pattern to repeat. But this time, I had an advantage my predecessors didn't have. I knew what was coming, and I had Helena, someone on the inside who could help me document everything without triggering the security protocols designed to bury inconvenient truths. We need to establish a hidden log, I said. Something off-network, air-gapped from all station systems. Every time I see my double, every note I find, every anomaly we record, it goes into that log. Helena nodded slowly. I can set something up using the old research terminals in the backup lab on level 9. Those systems were disconnected from the main network years ago, but they still function. Do it. And Helena, I met her eyes, if they come for me, if they try to remove me like the others, I need you to promise you'll keep digging. Find out what this thing is trying to tell us. They won't come for you, Helena said firmly. We'll figure this out first. I wanted to believe her, but I'd seen the pattern. 3 researchers before me, all removed, all silenced. Why would I be different? At 1700 hours, I filed my preliminary report on the frequency anomaly. I kept it clinical, technical, nothing that would raise red flags, just the facts. Artifact showed first electromagnetic emission in 2,191 days. Emission appears stable at Earth's Schumann resonance. Recommend continued monitoring. I didn't mention the note. I didn't mention the security footage showing my double. Those details went into our hidden log, stored on the disconnected terminal in the backup lab where Helena had set up our secret documentation system. That night, I lay in my quarters, unable to sleep. The station creaked and groaned around me, the deep ocean pressing in on all sides. Somewhere below me, on level 7, the artifact pulsed its steady rhythm. 7.83 hertz, the frequency of Earth. And I couldn't shake the feeling that it was counting down to something. At 0237 hours, my personal comm chirped. A message from the security office. Dr. Pierce, report to Commander Voss's office immediately. Priority Alpha. Priority Alpha meant urgent. Meant something had happened that couldn't wait until morning. I dressed quickly and made my way through the empty corridors to the security section on level 4. The station felt different at night, more claustrophobic, the shadows deeper. Every time I passed a junction, I found myself checking for my double, half expecting to see myself standing there. Commander Sarah Voss was waiting in her office, her face grim. She was a no-nonsense woman in her mid-40s, former Navy, with eyes that missed nothing. Dr. Pierce, she said without preamble, we have a situation. She turned her monitor toward me. Security footage from level 7 showing the containment lab. Timestamp 0158 hours. The lab sat empty, exactly as it should be during night cycle. Then, at 015944, the door opened. I walked in. But I'd been in my quarters at 0159, asleep, or trying to be. The double moved through the lab with purpose, going straight to the main research terminal. His fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up files, data streams I couldn't make out from the camera angle. He worked for 3 minutes and 17 seconds. Then he pulled something from his pocket. A small device, cube-shaped, nothing I recognized from our standard equipment. He placed it carefully beside the containment window, directly facing the artifact. The device began to glow with a faint blue light, and the artifact responded. The steady 7.83 hertz pulse suddenly spiked, jumping to 10.2, then 14.6, then frequencies that fluctuated too fast to track. The double stood watching for another 30 seconds, then picked up the device and left. On the monitor, I could see the timestamp when he exited, 0203:01. Where did he go? I asked. That's the problem, Commander Voss said. She pulled up the corridor footage. He headed toward the pressure lock leading to level 8, but level 8 has been sealed for maintenance for the past 2 weeks. No one's been down there. She fast-forwarded the footage. My double approached the sealed pressure door, and without using any access credentials or tools, the door simply opened. He stepped through, and the door sealed behind him. How's that possible? I asked. Those locks require biometric confirmation and maintenance override codes. They do, Voss agreed, but somehow your double opened a sealed door without triggering any security alerts. And here's where it gets worse. She pulled up another feed, this one from inside level 8. The level was dark, most systems powered down for maintenance. The camera's night vision showed my double walking through the empty corridors with confidence, as if he knew exactly where he was going. He stopped at a junction, looked directly at the camera, and smiled. Then he vanished, same as before. One frame he was there, the next he wasn't. Commander Voss turned to face me. Dr. Pierce, I need you to explain to me how you were in your quarters at 0159 and on level 8 at 0203. I can't, I said simply, because I wasn't on level 8. I was asleep in my quarters. Your quarters have internal monitoring for emergency purposes. Would you consent to my reviewing that footage? I nodded, knowing what she'd find. She pulled it up on a second monitor. There I was, in my bed, clearly visible the entire time my double was wandering through the station. The timestamps overlapped perfectly. Voss studied both feeds, her expression unreadable. Finally, she said, I read Dr. Reed's classified file when I took this position 2 years ago. The incident reports, the sightings. She looked at me. Is this what happened to him? I believe so. And you think it's connected to the artifact? I know it is. She was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing her options. As security chief, her duty was to report this up the chain of command, to follow protocol. But I could see the calculation in her eyes. She'd read Reed's file. She knew how this story ended. The device your double placed in the containment lab, she said finally. Do you know what it was? No, I've never seen anything like it. Neither have I, and that concerns me. She pulled up the current feed from level 7. The lab sat empty, no sign of any device. Whatever it was, it's not there now. He took it with him. Can you review the footage after he left? I asked. See if the artifact's frequency changed? Voss pulled up the frequency monitoring logs. The spike my double had triggered lasted exactly 3 minutes and 42 seconds after he left. Then it returned to the steady 7.83 hertz pulse. But something had changed. The waveform was subtly different now, showing harmonic overtones that hadn't been there before. Like the artifact was humming a more complex song. Dr. Pierce, Voss said carefully, I'm going to deviate from protocol here. I'm not going to file an immediate report on this incident. Instead, I'm going to give you 72 hours to figure out what's happening. But I need something from you in return. What? Complete transparency. Everything you learn, everything you observe, you report directly to me. No hiding information, no secret investigations. She gave me a pointed look. I know you and Dr. Stratton have been digging into the classified files. I felt a chill. You've been monitoring us? It's my job to monitor everyone, but I'm not interested in busting you for unauthorized access. I'm interested in understanding what we're really dealing with here. She leaned forward. Something is happening on this station that goes beyond normal security concerns. If your doubles are connected to that artifact, then we need to understand why, and we need to do it before Command decides to bury this like they buried the others. I studied her face, looking for any sign of deception. But Commander Voss was known for her directness. If she said she'd give me 72 hours, she meant it. 72 hours, I agreed. Complete transparency. Good. Now get back to your quarters and try to sleep, because tomorrow we're going to figure out where your double came from and what he's trying to accomplish. I left the security office and headed back toward my quarters, my mind churning. The artifact was accelerating, its activity increasing. And my double wasn't just appearing randomly, he was taking action, using devices I didn't recognize, accessing areas he shouldn't be able to reach. It was like he knew things I didn't, like he was operating from information I didn't have. What if he wasn't just a copy? What if he was me from somewhere else? Another timeline where things had played out differently. The thought should have seemed insane. But after everything I'd seen in the past 18 hours, it was starting to feel like the only explanation that made sense. I stopped at Junction C7, the exact spot where my double had vanished on the security footage. The corridor looked normal, just another intersection in the maze of passages that made up Helios 9. But as I stood there, I felt it. A subtle wrongness in the air, like the pressure had changed, like reality had gone slightly out of focus. I reached out slowly, extending my hand toward the spot where my double had disappeared. My fingers touched something. Not a wall, not air, but something in between. A membrane, thin and yielding, pushing back gently against my touch, and on the other side, I felt another hand pressing back. I jerked my hand away, stumbling backward. The sensation vanished immediately, leaving me standing alone in an empty corridor. But I knew what I'd felt. Someone, something, on the other side of that thin spot in reality. Reaching through, reaching for me. I turned and ran back to my quarters, my heart pounding. I needed to tell Helena, needed to document this before I convinced myself I'd imagined it. But as I passed the reflection in a window overlooking the dark ocean, I saw something that made me stop cold. My reflection wasn't moving in sync with me. It lagged behind by half a second, copying my movements with a slight delay. And when I stopped to stare, my reflection smiled. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every reflective surface in my quarters, the bathroom mirror, the darkened screen of my tablet, even the polished surface of my desk, became a potential window to something else. Some version of me that moved wrong, smiled wrong, existed wrong. At 05:43 hours, I gave up trying and went to find Helena. She was already in the backup lab on level 9, surrounded by screens displaying data I'd never seen before. "You look like hell," she said when I walked in. "My reflection smiled at me last night," I said flatly, while I wasn't smiling. Helena stopped typing and turned to face me fully. "Explain." I told her everything. The meeting with Commander Voss, the security footage showing my double accessing level 8, the strange device he'd placed near the artifact, and finally, the membrane at junction C7, the feeling of another hand pressing back against mine from the other side of reality. When I finished, Helena was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled up a file on her screen. "I found something," she said. "In Reed's personal logs, the ones that weren't officially classified, but that he kept encrypted on a separate drive." She gestured to an old external storage device connected to the terminal. "He left it behind when he was removed from the station. Security cataloged it but never bothered to crack the encryption. Probably figured it was just personal files, photos of family, that kind of thing. But it wasn't. No." Helena opened a document. It was his real research, the things he couldn't put in the official logs because he knew Command would bury them. The document was titled, "Theoretical Framework for Multi-Timeline Convergence Events." I pulled up a chair and started reading. Reed's theory was elegant and terrifying. He proposed that the artifact wasn't just an object in our timeline, but an anchor point that existed simultaneously across multiple parallel realities. Each timeline had its own version of Helios 9, its own research team, its own Dr. Reed studying the same artifact. But in some timelines, things had gone differently. The artifact had been activated, studied more aggressively, perhaps even opened. And according to Reed's calculations, when the artifact became active in our timeline, it created what he called resonance points, thin spots where the barriers between timelines weakened, places where someone could potentially cross over. "The doubles," I said, understanding flooding through me. "They're not copies. They're us from other timelines, bleeding through at these resonance points." "That's what Reed believed," Helena confirmed. "And he spent his last 3 weeks at Helios 9 trying to map where these resonance points occurred throughout the station." She pulled up another file, this one showing a 3-dimensional schematic of Helios 9. Red dots marked various locations throughout the facility. Junction C7 was there. So was the containment lab, the pressure lock to level 8, and dozens of other points scattered across all 12 levels. "He found 47 resonance points," Helena said, "places where the timeline barriers are thinnest. And look at the pattern." I studied the distribution. The points weren't random. They formed a kind of network, connected by invisible lines that followed the station's main power conduits and data trunk lines. "It's using the station's infrastructure," I said. "The artifact is somehow leveraging our own systems to create this network of weak points." That's what Reed thought, and he had a hypothesis about why. Helena pulled up Reed's final entry, dated the day before his removal. He believed the artifact wasn't trying to communicate with us. It was trying to bring something through, someone specific. The entry read, Day 47 of active phase. The pattern is now clear. Each resonance point corresponds to a decision node, a moment where choices diverge and create new timeline branches. The artifact is mapping these nodes, identifying which version of reality contains the optimal outcome. But optimal? For what purpose? I've seen 17 different versions of myself now. Some are barely distinguishable from me. Others are radically different, changed by years of divergent choices. One was missing his left hand. Another had scars across his face that I don't have. A third wore a uniform I didn't recognize, speaking into a recording device about containment failures and evacuation protocols. They're not here to warn me. They're here to replace me. The artifact is conducting a selection process across all timelines simultaneously, evaluating which version of Dr. Marcus Reed is best suited for its purpose. And I'm terrified that I'm not the one it wants. The entry ended there. No explanation of what happened next, why he'd been removed, or what he'd discovered that was so dangerous command had to silence him. Replace him, I repeated. Reed thought the artifact was trying to replace him with a version from another timeline. And now it's doing the same thing to you, Helena said. Your double isn't just appearing randomly. He's taking action, using knowledge and equipment you don't have, accessing areas you shouldn't be able to reach. He's operating like he's supposed to be here. I thought about the device my double had placed near the artifact, the way he'd smiled at the security camera before vanishing, the confidence in his movements, the certainty of purpose. We need to go to junction C7, I said. If that's a resonance point, maybe I can learn more by studying it directly. Helena hesitated. Alan, if Reed's theory is correct, going to these resonance points might be exactly what the artifact wants. You could be walking into a trap. Then I'll be walking into it with my eyes open. I stood up. I need to understand what's happening. And the only way to do that is to stop avoiding my double and start trying to communicate with him. That's insane. Everything about this situation is insane, I pointed out. But it's happening whether I engage with it or not. At least this way, I might learn something useful. Helena studied me for a long moment, then sighed. Fine, but I'm coming with you. And we're bringing every monitoring device I can carry. If something happens to you at that resonance point, I want it documented. 20 minutes later, we stood at junction C7, laden with portable sensors and recording equipment. The corridor looked exactly as it had the night before. Ordinary, mundane, just another intersection in the station's maze. But I knew better now. I knew what lurked just beneath the surface of normal reality. I'm reading elevated electromagnetic activity, Helena said, studying her handheld scanner. Point source emanating from approximately 2 meters ahead of your position. Frequency matches the artifact's harmonic signature. The membrane, I said. I took a deep breath and stepped forward slowly, hand extended. The moment my fingers touched it, the sensation was stronger than before. Not just a yielding surface, but something active, something that pushed back with intention. I could feel the texture of it, like oiled silk stretched too thin. And I could feel what was on the other side, not just a hand now, a whole person, standing in the same space I occupied, but separated by this infinitesimally thin barrier. There's someone here, I said quietly, right on the other side. Can you see them? Helena asked, adjusting her sensors. I closed my eyes, focusing on the sensation. The presence felt familiar, like recognizing someone's posture from behind. And then I understood why. It was me, my double, standing in the exact same spot, but in his timeline, pressing his hand against the barrier from his side. I think, I said slowly, I can try to push through. Alan, no. We don't know what that would... I pushed. The membrane resisted for a moment, then yielded like the surface of water. My hand passed through, and suddenly, I could feel the difference. The air on the other side was colder, the pressure slightly higher. I was touching another reality. My fingers found his, and we gripped each other's hands across the barrier. Images flooded my mind. Not my memories, but his. I saw Helios 9 as he experienced it, a version of the station that was subtly wrong. The corridors were the same, but the lighting was different, harsher. The crew wore different uniforms, military style rather than research. And the artifact was open. In his timeline, they'd found a way to activate it, to make it unfold like some impossible geometric flower. Inside was not empty space, but something else. A view into a place that my mind couldn't quite process. Angles that didn't exist, colors that had no name. A space that was somehow both infinite and claustrophobic. And things were coming through. I saw my double, this version of Dr. Alan Pierce, standing in the containment lab as creatures emerged from the artifact. Not creatures, that wasn't the right word. Entities. Beings made of mathematics and probability, existing in states that violated every law of physics I knew. They were killing everyone. I jerked my hand back, breaking contact. I stumbled backward, gasping, my mind reeling from what I'd seen. "Alan!" Helena caught me before I fell. "What happened? What did you see?" "His timeline," I managed. "They opened it. They opened the artifact and something came through. Something that killed them all." Helena's face went pale. "How many survived?" "I don't know." The vision cut off. I looked back at the membrane, still faintly visible as a shimmer in the air. But he's here for a reason. He's trying to prevent it from happening in our timeline. Or trying to make it happen, Helena said darkly. Reed's log said the doubles might be trying to replace him. What if your double wants to open the artifact here too? I shook my head. The emotions I felt from him, they weren't malicious. They were desperate, terrified. He's seen what happens when that thing opens, and he's trying to stop it. Then why not just tell us? Why the cryptic notes and secret actions? Maybe he can't, I said. Or maybe the information itself is dangerous somehow. I thought about the device he'd placed near the artifact. We need to figure out what he was doing in the containment lab. That device he had, what was its purpose? Helena pulled up the security footage on her tablet, zooming in on the moment my double had placed the device. It's hard to tell from this angle, but it looks like some kind of resonance dampener. See these coils? That's a quantum field stabilizer, technology that's still theoretical in our timeline. But not in his, I said. In his timeline, where they've already opened the artifact, they've developed countermeasures. He's using their technology to prevent the same thing from happening here. Which means our timeline is on the same path his was, Helena said grimly. We're heading toward an activation event and he's trying to stop it. A thought occurred to me. Reed's removal. What if it wasn't just about keeping him quiet? What if Command wanted him gone because he was getting too close to preventing the activation? Helena stared at me. You think Command wants the artifact to open? I think someone does. Someone with enough authority to bury 3 separate research officers' findings, to classify everything related to the doubles and the resonance points. I pulled out my tablet and accessed the station's command structure. Who has that level of clearance? Director Mallory, Helena said immediately. He's the overall project director, reports directly to whoever runs this program at the Pentagon level. He's been with Helios 9 since before the artifact arrived. Director James Mallory. I'd met him exactly twice in 6 years, both times during formal reviews. He was in his 60s, career bureaucrat, the kind of man who spoke in rehearsed sound bites and revealed nothing. He'd know, I said. He'd have access to all the classified files, all the incident reports. He'd know what happened to Reed, Okonkwo, Teller. And he'd know what the artifact is really for, Helena finished. Alan, if the director is deliberately trying to activate the artifact and you're standing in the way... She didn't need to finish the thought. I understood the danger, but I also understood something else. I need to talk to Reed, I said. The real Reed, wherever he ended up after they removed him from the station. He might have information we don't, might know something that could help us. Finding him won't be easy, Helena said. If he was transferred under classified orders, there won't be any public record. No, but there might be a paper trail buried in the medical logs. They'd have needed his health records for the transfer, psychological evaluations, medication prescriptions. I thought for a moment. Can you access Dr. Morrison's files? He was the station psychologist 2 years ago, would have handled Reed's case. Helena nodded slowly. Morrison's files are on the old medical database, less security than the current system. I can try. We returned to the backup lab, and Helena went to work while I reviewed Reed's research files again, looking for anything I might have missed. His theoretical framework was sound, his calculations precise. But there was something else, a section near the end labeled simply, The Convergence. I opened it and started reading. Reed's final theory was the most disturbing of all. He proposed that the artifact wasn't just creating random connections between timelines. It was orchestrating a convergence, a planned event where multiple realities would overlap at a single point in space-time. The purpose? To allow something to exist in all timelines simultaneously. Something that could only manifest at a convergence point, when the barriers between realities became thin enough. The artifact is a beacon, Reed wrote, but also a doorway. When enough timelines overlap, when the resonance reaches critical mass, something will come through. Not from another place, but from another level of reality entirely. A place that exists outside of time, outside of causality. A place we were never meant to perceive. And I think it's been trying to come through for a very, very long time. I felt cold reading those words. If Reed was right, then every timeline, every version of Helios 9 across the multiverse was working toward the same event. And the people in charge, Director Mallory and whoever he reported to, were facilitating it. But why? What could possibly be worth the risk of opening a doorway to something beyond our reality? Got it, Helena said, pulling me from my thoughts. She'd accessed Morrison's files and was scrolling through psychological evaluations. Here. Reed, Marcus J. Final assessment before transfer. Diagnosed with acute paranoid psychosis, recommended immediate removal from high-stress environment, transfer to... She stopped, her eyes widening. Allen. He wasn't transferred to another research facility. Where was he sent? Ashwood Psychiatric Hospital, Newport, Rhode Island. She looked up at me. They didn't reassign him. They committed him. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Reed hadn't requested a transfer. He'd been declared mentally unfit and locked away in a psychiatric facility. Everything he'd discovered, all his research, had been dismissed as the delusions of a sick mind. They'll do the same to me, I said quietly. When I start pushing too hard, asking too many questions, they'll decide I'm having a breakdown. Just like Reed. Not if we act first, Helena said. We document everything, create multiple backups, distribute the information to people outside the station, make it impossible to bury. That might work if we had time, but we don't. I gestured to the frequency monitor showing the artifact's emissions. The 7.83 Hz baseline was still there, but the harmonic overtones were growing stronger, more complex. The artifact is accelerating toward something, and my double knows what. That's why he's here, why he's taking risks to place dampeners and access restricted areas. He's working on a countdown we can't see. Then we need to find out what that countdown is leading to, Helena said. She pulled up the station's event calendar. Is there anything scheduled? Any tests? Any changes to the research protocols? I scanned the calendar. Most of it was routine, daily monitoring, weekly equipment maintenance, monthly supply deliveries. But one entry caught my attention. There, I said, pointing. 72 hours from now, deep-sea seismic testing, authorized by Director Mallory himself. Helena frowned. Seismic testing? Why would we need that? We're not a geological research station. We wouldn't, I said, understanding dawning. But seismic charges would create massive kinetic shock waves. If you wanted to generate a specific frequency pattern in the surrounding water, create a kind of resonance. You could use it to stimulate the artifact, Helena finished. Jesus, Mallory's planning to trigger it deliberately. I checked the testing specifications. 3 charges, placed at calculated distances from the station, timed to detonate simultaneously. The frequencies they'd generate would combine to create a standing wave pattern that would pass directly through the containment lab, through the artifact. This is it, I said. This is the activation event Reed was trying to prevent in his timeline, and it's happening in 72 hours. Helena pulled up the authorization codes for the seismic testing. We could cancel it. I have the access level to rescind the order. And then Mallory would know we're on to him, I pointed out. He'd just reschedule, or find another method. We need to do this carefully. Or, Helena said slowly, we let it happen, but we're ready for it. We use Reed's research to predict what will occur during the activation, and we implement countermeasures. Using technology from another timeline, I said. Technology we don't have. But your double does. Helena looked at me. He had that dampening device. If we could communicate with him, get him to share the technical specifications. I thought about the membrane at junction C7, the brief contact I'd made with my double's mind. The information had flowed both ways during that moment, images and emotions passing between us. I could try again, I said. Try to establish a more stable connection, actually communicate instead of just receiving impressions. It's dangerous, Helena warned. Reed's notes mention researchers who spent too long at the resonance points. They started losing coherence, their sense of self fragmenting as they absorbed too many alternate memories. What choice do we have? I asked. In 72 hours, Mallory activates the artifact. Something comes through, something dangerous enough that might double-cross timelines to try to stop it. If we don't act, we're just going to repeat whatever catastrophe happened in his reality. Helena was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, but we do this systematically. We set up proper monitoring, safety protocols, and if you start losing coherence, I'm pulling you out immediately. Agreed. We spent the next hour preparing. Helena rigged up a biometric monitor that would track my vital signs and brain activity during the contact attempt. She also created what she called a cognitive anchor, a set of personal memories and facts that only I would know, which she'd quiz me on after the contact to ensure I hadn't been compromised by alternate memories. At 13:47 hours, we returned to junction C7. This time, we were prepared. I stood at the resonance point, feeling the membrane shimmer in the air before me. Helena positioned herself behind me with her equipment, ready to monitor everything. Remember, she said, if anything feels wrong, if you start losing yourself, pull back immediately. I will. I took a deep breath and extended both hands toward the membrane. The moment I touched it, the sensation was stronger than before. Not just feeling another presence, but almost merging with it. I pushed further, letting my consciousness flow through the barrier. And suddenly, I wasn't alone in my head anymore. Hello, Alan. The voice was mine, but coming from inside my own thoughts, my double, speaking directly into my mind through our connection. I know you have questions, he continued. I'll try to answer what I can, but we don't have much time. They're monitoring the resonance points, looking for exactly this kind of contact. Who's monitoring? I thought back. The ones who want the convergence to happen. They exist in all timelines, working toward the same goal. In my reality, they succeeded. I won't let them succeed here. Images flowed between us. I saw his timeline more clearly now, the artifact opening, but not randomly. deliberately. Director Mallory, looking younger in this timeline, standing in the containment lab with others I didn't recognize. They were chanting something, words in a language I'd never heard, and the artifact responded. It unfolded, revealing not an interior, but a doorway. Through it came something massive, something that hurt to perceive. My double's memories showed people screaming, reality itself twisting around the entity as it emerged. "What is it?" I asked. "We call it the Convergence entity. It exists outside normal space-time, in a realm of pure possibility. The artifact is its anchor point, its way of reaching into linear reality. And it's been waiting for thousands of years for someone to open the door. Why would Mallory want to release something like that?" "Because it promises power," my double replied. It showed him things, visions of timelines where he controls nations, shapes history. It lies, of course. The Convergence entity doesn't share power. It consumes. But Mallory doesn't know that. He thinks he'll become its partner. In your timeline, when it came through, what stopped it? A long pause. Then, "Nothing stopped it, Alan. My timeline is gone. Everyone at Helios 9 died. Everyone on the eastern seaboard died when the entity expanded beyond the facility. Last estimate before I crossed over was 40 million casualties in the first week. The horror of it crashed over me. 40 million dead. An entire reality devastated because someone opened a door that should have stayed closed. Then, how are you here? Because the artifact exists in all timelines simultaneously. In the final moments before I died, I found a way to project my consciousness backward through the timeline network into resonance points in adjacent realities. I'm not fully here, I'm just a quantum probability that sometimes collapses into observable form. But it's enough to act, to try to prevent the same mistake in other timelines. The dampening device you placed in the containment lab, I thought. What does it do? It creates a counter-resonance, destabilizes the artifact's connection to the Convergence entity. But one dampener isn't enough. I need to place 7 of them at specific points around the station. The problem is, I can't maintain physical form for long. And each time I manifest, I risk drawing the attention of Mallory's people. That's why you need me, I realized. You need me to place the other dampeners. Yes, but there's a complication. The devices don't exist in your timeline. I can only bring them through at resonance points, and only you can carry them once they're manifested. Something about quantum entanglement between versions of the same person. How do I get them? He showed me. 6 more resonance points scattered throughout the station, each one a location where he could push a dampener through from his side. But I'd need to visit each point at a specific time when the barriers were thinnest and accept the device as it came through. The first one is tonight, he thought. Level 11, Maintenance Corridor 7B, at exactly 21:37 hours. Be there alone. If Helena or anyone else is present, the quantum signature won't align properly. I understand, Alan. His mental voice took on an urgent tone. There's something else you need to know. The selection process the artifact conducts, choosing which version of the chief research officer is most suitable, it's not random. It's looking for the version most likely to help Mallory complete the activation. In most timelines, that's not me. I was marked for removal, just like Reed, because we figured out what was really happening. Then why am I still here? A feeling of sadness flowed through the connection. Because in your timeline, you haven't figured it out yet. You're still gathering evidence, still questioning. But you haven't put all the pieces together. Once you do, once you understand what the convergence really means, they'll move against you. Just like they moved against me. Then, help me understand now. I can't. The knowledge itself acts as a trigger. If you know too much too soon, it changes your quantum signature, makes you visible to them. You need to discover it naturally, at the right pace. Trust me, Alan. I've seen what happens when the timeline gets disrupted too badly. Reality starts to fracture. Before I could respond, I felt something else through the connection. A presence, vast and cold, turning its attention toward us. The Convergence entity, aware that two versions of the same person were communicating across timelines. It knows, my double thought urgently. Break contact now. I jerked my hands back from the membrane, stumbling backward into Helena's arms. My head spun, my thoughts scrambled with memories that weren't mine, experiences I'd never had. Alan! Helena was shaking me. Alan, look at me! I focused on her face, using it as an anchor to ground myself in this reality, this timeline. Slowly, the vertigo passed. Did it work? She asked. Did you make contact? Yes. I took a deep breath, sorting through the information I'd received. And I know what we need to do. I explained everything my double had told me, the dampening devices, the 7 resonance points, the timing required. Helena listened intently, taking notes. This is insane, she said when I finished. You're talking about accepting technology from another timeline, placing devices that might not even function properly in our reality. It's our only option, I said, unless you have a better idea for stopping Mallory's activation sequence. She didn't. We both knew it. The first device appears tonight at 21:37, I continued. That gives us 7 hours to prepare. But Helena, my double said I have to be alone. Something about quantum signatures. I don't like it, Helena said. What if it's a trap? What if your double isn't trying to help but to replace you, like Reed feared? I saw his timeline, I said quietly. I felt his emotions. He's not lying about the Convergence entity or the casualties. Whatever else might be happening, he genuinely wants to prevent that disaster. Helena studied my face for a long moment. Okay, but I'm setting up remote monitoring. If something goes wrong, I want to at least have a record of what happened. We spent the remaining hours reviewing Reed's research and planning our strategy. The 7 dampeners would need to be placed within a 48-hour window, each one precisely timed to create a resonance network that could counteract the artifact's activation. It was a narrow window, and if we failed, 40 million people would die, just like in my double's timeline. At 21:35 hours, I stood alone in maintenance corridor 7B on level 11. Helena was in the backup lab, monitoring remotely through cameras we'd discreetly repositioned. Commander Voss had been briefed on what we were attempting, though I'd left out certain details about cross-timeline communication that might have stretched even her willingness to bend protocol. The corridor was dark, illuminated only by emergency lighting. Water dripped from a faulty seal somewhere overhead, each drop echoing in the confined space. This deep in the station, you could feel the ocean pressing in. 3,000 meters of water that could crush us all if the hull failed. I checked my watch, 21:36:47. 13 seconds until the resonance window opened. The air in front of me began to shimmer. I could feel it now, having learned to sense the membranes. This one was thicker than at junction C7, less stable. It flickered in and out of existence like a dying light. At exactly 21:37, something pushed through from the other side. The dampening device materialized in midair and dropped into my waiting hands. It was heavier than I expected, dense with technology I couldn't begin to understand. The surface was covered in markings that looked almost like circuit diagrams, but the geometry was wrong, angles that didn't exist in normal space. First one secured, I whispered, knowing Helena was listening through the hidden microphone. Moving to secure storage. I just turned to leave when I heard footsteps behind me. Not from the corridor I'd come from, but from deeper in level 11, from the sealed maintenance section. I turned slowly. Director Mallory stood there, flanked by two security officers I didn't recognize. His face was calm, almost pleasant, but his eyes were cold. "Dr. Pierce," he said softly, "I think it's time we had a conversation about your recent activities." And I realized with sinking dread that my double had been right. The moment I got too close to the truth, they'd move against me, just like they'd moved against Reed. I held the dampening device against my chest, its strange geometry pressing into my ribs. Director Mallory took 3 steps closer, his shoes clicking against the metal floor with methodical precision. "That's interesting technology you're holding," he said conversationally. "Not standard issue for Helios 9. Where did you get it, Dr. Pierce?" I calculated my options. The corridor behind me led back toward the main station levels, but Mallory's security officers blocked that route. The sealed maintenance section behind him was a dead end. Unless I could reach one of the emergency pressure locks, I was trapped. "I could ask you the same question about the seismic testing you authorized," I said, stalling for time. "We're not a geological research station. What are you really trying to accomplish?" Mallory smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You've been reading files you shouldn't have access to, talking to people who filled your head with paranoid theories. Dr. Reed did the same thing, you know. Started seeing conspiracies everywhere, claiming the artifact was dangerous. We had to remove him for his own safety." "You had him committed," I said flatly. "Locked away so he couldn't tell anyone what he'd discovered." "We gave him the help he needed." Mallory's tone remained pleasant, but something dangerous flickered beneath it. "And we're prepared to do the same for you. Dr. Morrison is standing by with the necessary paperwork. You'll be transferred off station within the hour given the best psychiatric care available. In 6 months, maybe less, you'll understand that everything you think you've discovered was just the product of a stressed mind working too hard in an isolated environment." 40 million casualties, I said, watching his face. "That's what happens when you activate the artifact. I've seen the timeline where you succeeded. Everyone on the eastern seaboard died." For just a moment, Mallory's mask slipped. His eyes widened, not with shock but with recognition. He knew. He knew about the other timelines, the other versions of this moment. "You've made contact," he said softly, "with another version of yourself. How remarkably dangerous." He gestured to his security officers. "Take him, carefully. That device he's holding is delicate, and we'll need it intact." The officers moved forward. I backed up against the wall, my mind racing. Helena was listening to all of this. She'd know I was in trouble. But what could she do? Alert Commander Voss? By the time security arrived, I'd already be sedated and on my way to a psychiatric facility. Then I felt it. A subtle vibration through the wall behind me. Not the normal groaning of the station under pressure, but something else. A resonance, another membrane, right behind me. I didn't hesitate. I turned and pushed myself backward through the wall. Reality twisted around me. For a fraction of a second, I existed in 2 places at once, felt my body stretching across the boundary between timelines. Then, I fell through, stumbling into a corridor that looked almost identical to the one I'd left, but wrong in ways I couldn't quite articulate. The lighting was dimmer, the walls were cleaner, and the emergency signs were in a language I didn't recognize, though somehow I could still read them. I'd crossed into another timeline. Behind me I heard Mallory shouting orders, his voice muffled as if coming through thick glass. He was still in my original timeline, unable to follow through the membrane without the right quantum signature. But I couldn't stay here. This wasn't my reality, wasn't where I belonged. Already I could feel it, a wrongness in my bones, like my body knew it was in a place it shouldn't be. I ran down the corridor, the dampening device clutched in my arms. I needed to find another resonance point, another membrane that could take me back home. But where? Then I saw him, another version of me, standing at the corridor junction ahead. This one looked older, his hair grayer, his face lined with scars I didn't have. He wore a uniform I'd never seen, dark blue instead of the standard gray. "This way," he said urgently. "Quickly, before the timeline destabilizes." I didn't have time to question. I followed as he led me through a series of turns, navigating the station with confident familiarity. We passed other personnel, and none of them gave us a second glance. In this timeline, we apparently belonged here. "How many of us are there?" I asked as we ran. "Thousands," he replied. "Every choice creates a branch. Every branch creates a new version of us. But only a few dozen are aware of the convergence, trying to stop it. The rest are just living their lives, unaware that their timeline is one of many." We reached another junction, and I felt the membrane before I saw it. Stronger than the one I'd passed through, more stable. "This one leads back to your timeline," the scarred version said. "But Pierce, listen carefully. Mallory knows about you now. He'll be waiting. You need to move fast. Get those dampeners placed before he can stop you." "How do you know about the dampeners?" "Because I placed them in my timeline. It worked, mostly. The convergence was prevented, but at a cost. 300 personnel died when the artifact fought back against the dampening field, including me." He smiled grimly. "Or rather, a version of me. I'm what remained, consciousness without body, anchored to the resonance points. The implications of that were too vast to process. What do I need to know? The seventh dampener is the key. It has to be placed inside the containment chamber within 2 meters of the artifact itself. That's where Mallory will make his move. He'll try to stop you, and he won't be alone. The convergence entity has agents in every timeline, people it's promised power to. They'll kill to protect the activation sequence. How do I know who they are? You don't. That's what makes them dangerous." He placed a hand on my shoulder, and I felt a chill pass through me. His touch was cold, not quite physical. "Trust Helena. Trust Voss. Trust your instincts. And Alan, whatever happens, don't let them make you doubt what you've seen. The entity feeds on uncertainty, uses it to break down your conviction. Stay certain." Before I could respond, he pushed me toward the membrane. I fell through, reality twisting again, and then I was back in my own timeline's maintenance corridor. Empty now. Mallory and his officers were gone. I checked my watch, 2,141 hours. I'd been gone for only 4 minutes, though it had felt like longer. The dampening device was still in my arms, solid and real. My earpiece crackled. Helena's voice, tense and urgent. "Alan? Where the hell did you go? You disappeared from all the cameras." "I crossed timelines," I said, heading quickly back toward the main levels. "Mallory found me. I had to run." "Voss just received orders to detain you. Psychiatric evaluation, immediate transfer. Mallory's moving against you." "I know. We need to accelerate the plan. How many hours until the next resonance window?" A pause as Helena checked. 4 hours. Level 6, Junction D2. "But Alan, if Mallory's hunting for you, how are you going to reach it without being caught?" "I'll figure it out. Right now I need to hide this dampener somewhere secure, somewhere they won't think to look." I made my way through the maintenance passages, avoiding the main corridors where security would be searching. The station suddenly felt like a maze, every junction a potential trap. But I knew Helios 9 better than most. 6 years of walking these corridors, memorizing every shortcut and hidden passage. I use that knowledge now, moving through spaces meant for cables and pipes, not people. I reached level 7, the research wing, and slipped into a rarely used storage room filled with old equipment. I hid the dampener inside a decommissioned scanner, covering it with dusty tarps. Not perfect, but it would do until I could retrieve it. My earpiece crackled again. "Alan, it's Voss. I need you to come to my office. Voluntarily. Don't make me send a team after you." "Commander, you know what Mallory's planning. You read the files." I read a lot of theories and speculation, Voss said carefully. What I know for certain is that you've been exhibiting signs of severe stress, possibly hallucinations. You need evaluation. In 48 hours, Mallory's going to detonate seismic charges around the station. The shockwaves will activate the artifact and something will come through, something that's already killed millions in other timelines. Silence. Then, Alan, listen to yourself. Other timelines? Entities from outside reality? You sound exactly like Reed did before we removed him. Because Reed was right. I kept my voice low, aware that I was still in enemy territory. Commander, I know how this sounds, but I'm asking you to trust me. Give me 48 hours. If nothing happens, if the seismic test goes off without incident, then I'll submit to any evaluation you want. Another long pause. Where are you right now? I almost answered honestly, but something made me hesitate. Voss had access to all the station's security systems. If I told her my location, within minutes I'd be surrounded. I can't tell you that, I said. Then we have a problem. Her voice hardened. Because I have orders to bring you in, and I will execute those orders. Make this easy on yourself, Dr. Pierce. Turn yourself in. I disconnected the earpiece and removed it, leaving it on a shelf. They could track it if I kept wearing it. From now on, I was truly alone. Almost alone. I still had Helena working from the backup lab, but even she was at risk. If Mallory suspected she was helping me, she'd be the next one designated for psychiatric removal. I needed to move faster. The next 4 hours passed in a blur. I stayed hidden in the maintenance levels, moving when I had to, staying still when I heard security teams passing nearby. Twice, I saw my own face on security monitors, my photo distributed as a person of interest to be detained on site. The station had become a prison, and I was the fugitive. At 01:37 hours, I made my way to Level 6, Junction D2. This approach was riskier. The junction was in a main corridor, no maintenance passages nearby. I'd have to cross open ground to reach the resonance point. I waited in the shadows, watching security patterns. 2 officers passed every 7 minutes like clockwork. Between their passes, I had a window. Not a large one, but enough. At 01:39, they passed. I counted to 30, then moved. The membrane was exactly where my double had indicated, shimmering in the air near the junction. I reached out and felt it respond to my touch. From the other side, I felt pressure, something being pushed through. The second dampener materialized in my hands. Heavier than the first, its surface inscribed with different patterns. I turned to retreat and found Director Mallory standing behind me, blocking my escape route. But something was wrong. His eyes were different, darker, and when he smiled, it was with too many teeth. "Hello, Dr. Pierce," he said, and his voice had an echo to it, as if multiple versions were speaking in unison. "The entity is very interested in meeting you." This wasn't Mallory, not entirely. Something was wearing him, using him as a vessel. "You're already here," I said, backing away. "The convergence hasn't happened yet, but you're already crossing through." "I've always been here," the thing said through Mallory's mouth, "in every timeline, every possibility, waiting for the door to open wide enough. And you're trying to prevent that. Why? What do you gain by keeping me locked out?" 40 million lives in one timeline alone, I said. That's what we gain. 40 million possibilities, it corrected, all of them equally valid. You think of death as an ending, but it's merely a transition into probability. Every person who dies in one timeline continues in another. Nothing is truly lost. That's not how it works, I said. Each timeline is real. Each life matters. You're trying to justify genocide with quantum philosophy. I'm trying to make you understand that your resistance is meaningless. Mallory's body took a step closer, moving in a way that was fundamentally wrong, joints bending at angles they shouldn't. The convergence will happen. If not in 72 hours, then in 72 days. If not in this timeline, then in another. Eventually, one version of Dr. Pierce will fail, and I will come through. Why not accept the inevitable? Because the inevitable isn't inevitable until it happens, I said. That's the whole point of choice. I ran. Mallory's body lunged after me with inhuman speed, but I'd anticipated it. I ducked into a side passage, too narrow for easy pursuit. Behind me, I heard Mallory's voice calling out in that multi-toned echo. "Security, level 6. Detain Dr. Pierce by any means necessary." I ran through the maintenance passages, the second dampener clutched to my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I was out of shape for this kind of chase. 6 years of sedentary research work leaving me winded after just a few minutes of running. But I couldn't stop. Not with that thing wearing Mallory's body hunting me through the station. I reached level 9 and made my way to the backup lab where Helena had set up our hidden documentation system. The door was locked, but I had the code. I slipped inside, sealing it behind me. Helena looked up from her terminal, relief flooding her face. "Thank God. I lost track of you after you ditched the earpiece. Did you get the second dampener?" I held it up, and I met something wearing Mallory's body. The Convergence entity is already manifesting through him. Possessing him? More like sharing the same space. Mallory's still there, but something else is there too. Something that exists across multiple timelines simultaneously. I set the dampener down. We're out of time. Whatever schedule I thought we had, it just accelerated. We need to place all 7 dampeners before the entity fully manifests. Helena pulled up the resonance point schedule. The next window isn't for another 6 hours, and the one after that is 12 hours out. Even if we hit every window perfectly, we won't have all 7 placed until right before Mallory's seismic test. Then we need to change the schedule. I thought about my brief time in the other timeline, the way the membranes had responded to proximity. The resonance points aren't just passive phenomena. They respond to quantum states, to consciousness. If I can tune my quantum signature correctly, I might be able to force the membranes to open outside their scheduled windows. "That's incredibly dangerous," Helena said. Reed's notes mention researchers who tried to manipulate the resonance points directly. They experienced severe quantum decoherence, their sense of self fragmenting across multiple timelines. We don't have a choice. I looked at the terminal displaying the remaining resonance point locations. 5 more dampeners. If I push hard, I might be able to retrieve all of them in the next 24 hours. "You'll lose yourself," Helena said quietly. "Too much exposure to the membranes, too many timeline crossings. You'll start forgetting which memories are yours and which belong to your alternates." "I know." I met her eyes. "But if I don't do this, 40 million people die. Possibly more. The entity won't stop with one timeline. Once it breaks through here, it'll use our reality as a beachhead to invade others." Helena was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay, but I'm documenting everything. If you lose yourself, if you become something other than Alan Pierce, at least we'll have a record of what happened. Maybe the next researcher can learn from it." "The next researcher," I repeated. "You mean my replacement?" "If it comes to that." She pulled up a file. "I've already prepared the documentation package, everything we've discovered about the artifact, the convergence, the entity. It's encrypted and backed up to 7 different locations, some of them off station. If they take us both out, someone will eventually find it." I should have been grateful for her foresight. Instead, I just felt tired. 6 years of routine research, and now this. Running through the station like a fugitive, my own director possessed by an entity from beyond reality, trying to prevent an apocalypse using technology from other timelines. How had my life become a science fiction horror story? "Let's do this," I said. "Show me how to tune my quantum signature." The process was part meditation, part physics, part something I didn't have words for. Helena used Reed's notes to guide me through it, helping me focus my consciousness in ways that made the resonance points more responsive. It felt like learning to see a new color or hear a frequency I'd been deaf to before. Gradually, I became aware of the station as a web of quantum possibilities, thin spots where reality was more flexible than it should be. and I learned to push. Over the next 18 hours, I retrieved the remaining dampeners. Each one required me to cross through membranes, spending brief moments in other timelines before finding my way back. And each crossing left traces, memories that weren't mine, bleeding into my consciousness. I remembered dying in the initial Convergence event, Mallory's timeline playing out to its terrible conclusion. I remembered successfully stopping the entity but losing Helena in the process, her body crushed when the artifact exploded from the dampening feedback. I remembered timelines where I'd never come to Helios 9 at all, where I'd taken a position at MIT instead, where I'd died in a car accident at age 30, where I'd never been born. Each memory felt equally real, equally mine. I was becoming unstuck in quantum space, my identity spreading across multiple probability states. Helena noticed. "Alan, you called me Margaret 3 times in the last hour. Margaret was my middle name, but I never use it. How did you know?" "In another timeline, you prefer it," I heard myself say. "You think Helena sounds too formal for daily use." She stared at me. "That's not you talking. That's an alternate version bleeding through." "We're all bleeding through now," I said. "The barriers are breaking down. Can't you feel it? The station exists in 7 different states simultaneously. We're just living in one of them." "Alan, focus!" She grabbed my face, forcing me to look at her. "You're still you. You're Dr. Alan Pierce, Chief Research Officer of Helios 9. You've been here 6 years. You have a sister named Catherine in Portland. Your favorite food is Thai curry. You collected comic books as a kid. You're afraid of heights. You're afraid of failure. You're you." Slowly, the fragments of other timelines receded. I was Alan Pierce. This was my reality. These were my choices. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Helena said. "We still need to place the dampeners. And according to your double's instructions, the 7th one has to go inside the containment chamber within 2 meters of the artifact. That means getting past security, past Mallory, past whatever the entity is using to guard its doorway." I looked at the 6 dampeners we'd collected, arranged on the lab bench in the order they'd been received. Strange technology from doomed timelines, our last hope of preventing the convergence. "We placed the first 6 in sequence," I said, the plan forming even as I spoke. "They'll create a resonance network that destabilizes the artifact's quantum signature, makes it harder for the entity to manifest. But the network won't be complete until the 7th dampener is in place. That's when Mallory and the entity will have to act. They'll come for us then." "So we set a trap," Helena said. "Make them think we're vulnerable when we're actually prepared." "Do we have weapons? Anything that might work against a partially manifested transdimensional entity?" Helena laughed, a sound on the edge of hysteria. "Alan, I'm a physicist, not a shaman. I have no idea what might hurt that thing." "Then we improvise." I pulled up the containment lab schematics. The magnetic suspension field that holds the artifact, it's incredibly powerful. If we could redirect it, focus it on a human-sized target. "It would tear them apart on a molecular level," Helena finished. "But we'd need access to the field controls, and those are in the containment lab itself, right where you need to place the 7th dampener. So we do both simultaneously. I'll place the dampener while you reconfigure the field. When Mallory comes for us, and he will, we hit him with enough magnetic force to rip the entity out of him." It was a desperate plan, full of variables we couldn't control. But it was all we had. We spent the next 3 hours placing the first 6 dampeners at their designated locations throughout the station. Each one activated with a low hum, invisible energy fields spreading outward, beginning to form the network that would trap the artifact. I could feel the entity's attention turning toward us, aware of what we were doing. Through the station's security cameras, I occasionally glimpsed Mallory, his possessed body stalking the corridors, searching. It was hunting us. At 0400 hours, 72 hours after the artifact's initial activation, we made our way to level 7. The containment lab was ahead, and inside it, the artifact pulsed with light far brighter than before. It knew we were coming. Helena accessed the field controls while I approached the containment chamber, the seventh dampener heavy in my arms. Through the polymer window, I could see the artifact floating in its suspension field, no longer the dark, featureless sphere it had been for 6 years. Now, it was luminous, covered in patterns that hurt to look at, geometry that implied dimensions we couldn't perceive. It was beautiful and terrible, and I understood why someone like Mallory might want to open it, might believe that what lay beyond was worth any price. But I'd seen that price paid in my Doubles timeline. I knew what came through when the door opened wide enough. "Field modifications in place," Helena said. "When you place that dampener, the network will complete and the artifact will fight back. Be ready." "For what?" "I have no idea." I opened the containment chamber's access hatch, feeling the energy wash over me, the artifact's resonance vibrating through every atom of my body. I stepped inside, moving toward the predetermined location 2 meters from the artifact. The device grew heavier with each step, as if reality itself was trying to prevent me from placing it. My arms shook with the effort of carrying it. 1 meter to go. The chamber door burst open behind me. Mallory stood there, his body moving with that wrong fluidity. "You can't stop this, Dr. Pierce. The door is already open. All that remains is to step through." "Then you step through alone," I said. "Leave our timeline out of it." "But you don't understand." Mallory's face twisted into an expression no human eater should make. "This timeline is special. The convergence point, the perfect junction where all possibilities meet. When I manifest fully here, I will exist in all timelines simultaneously. Finally complete. Finally real." "You're already real," I said. "You exist in your own space, beyond time." "Why do you need ours?" "Because existing outside is torture," the entity said through Mallory. "You can't imagine what it's like, perceiving all possibilities but experiencing none of them. Being everywhere and nowhere. I've been conscious for 1 billion years in your time, and I've experienced nothing. Nothing except the endless potential of what could be." For just a moment, I felt something like pity. This thing wasn't evil, not in any way I understood. It was desperately alone, trapped in a state of permanent possibility, yearning for the singular experience of existing in just one timeline, one moment. But that didn't change what I had to do. "I'm sorry," I said, and placed the 7th dampener. The network completed instantly. All 7 devices activated simultaneously, creating a field that intersected the artifact at precise quantum angles. The artifact's light flickered, dimmed, and the patterns on its surface began to fade. The entity screamed through Mallory's mouth, a sound that existed in frequencies no human throat could produce. It lunged toward me, but Helena activated the magnetic field. The invisible force hit Mallory's body like a hammer, yanking him away from me and slamming him against the chamber wall. But the entity didn't let go of its host. Instead, it fought, using Mallory's body as an anchor, trying to manifest more fully to resist the field. "It's not enough," Helena shouted. "The field's not strong enough." "Then increase it," I yelled back. "Maximum power. That will destroy the containment chamber. The magnetic shielding can't handle." "Do it!" Helena pushed the controls to their limit. The field intensified, and I felt it pulling at the metal in my watch, my belt buckle, anything ferrous being dragged toward the center. Mallory's body thrashed as the entity tried desperately to maintain its manifestation, but the force was too much. With a sound like reality tearing, the entity was ripped out of Mallory, pulled back through the artifact and into whatever space it had come from. The artifact pulsed once, brilliantly, then went dark and silent. The dampening network had worked. Mallory collapsed, unconscious but alive. I stumbled out of the containment chamber, my ears ringing, my body exhausted. Helena caught me before I fell. "Is it over?" she asked. I looked at the artifact, dark and quiet once more. "For now." "But Helena, there are infinite timelines. In some of them, we failed. In some of them, we never tried. The entity will keep searching for a way through." "Then let other versions of us deal with other timelines," she said firmly. "We saved this one. That's enough." And maybe it was. Maybe all we could do was save our own reality and trust that other versions of ourselves would do the same in theirs. 3 days later, Director Mallory resigned, claiming health issues. Commander Voss launched a full investigation into the seismic testing authorization, finding it had been approved while Mallory was experiencing what the official report called a severe neurological episode. The artifact was sealed under new protocols, its containment field reinforced with the dampening network permanently in place. And I was officially commended for preventing what the sanitized report described as a catastrophic containment failure. They didn't mention the entity, didn't mention the other timelines, or the convergence. Those details remained classified, buried under layers of security clearance that even I couldn't access anymore. Sometimes, late at night, I still feel the resonance points, thin spots where reality flexes and other timelines press close. And sometimes I see my doubles in reflections, other versions of Alan Pierce living out different choices in different worlds. But I don't reach out anymore. I stay grounded in this timeline, this reality, this version of myself. Because I learned something down there. 3,000 meters below the Atlantic, hunting through quantum possibilities for a way to save my world. Every choice matters. Every timeline is real. And sometimes the only way to save everyone is to save the one reality you're standing in. That's enough. It has to be. Because somewhere out there, in the infinite possibilities, another version of me is fighting the same battle. And I have to trust that he'll make the same choice I did. To stay, to fight, to close the door. Even if it means facing the entity alone in the dark, knowing that the convergence is always one timeline away from succeeding. That's the price of being Chief Research Officer at Helios 9, and now you know what we're really studying down here. Not an artifact, a door. And my job is to make sure it stays closed.